Welcome, Chosen X. You cross a narrow seam between what was expected of you and what waits beyond ordinary sight. The air here is different. It carries a frequency that touches memory and possibility. Your arrival did not happen by chance. Some pattern recognized your pulse before language named your longing, and that recognition opened this threshold. At first, the change was quiet. A habitual schedule loses its hold, a worn conviction softens, a practiced compromise no longer fits like skin. These small unmoorings are not failures. They are answers to an unasked question. When routine no longer aligns with sense, you turn inward and find a compass with a low insistence. You learned long ago to cloak curiosity in polite smiles and customary gestures. In crowds your gaze lingered on things others dismissed, the way light rested on a doorway, a fragment of melody that tugged memory, a gesture that did not belong. Those fragments gathered like seeds under snow, patient and unseen. Now thresholds thin and they begin to unfurl. Do not confuse solitude with absence. Solitude is an instrument tuned to receive a voice beneath the world's chatter. In silence you were taught to fear your questions. Here silence refines sensation into notice, and notice into direction. Each quiet hour has been rehearsal for a larger song. Resistance will approach. Companions who once mirrored doubts will recoil when you step toward clarity. Familiar stations that offer comfort will resist the new shape you form. Do not let their recoil become evidence that the path is ruined. Often what recedes is the furniture of a life that cannot contain the motion emerging within you. Within you there is a lineage that keeps both wound and wisdom. It is not only genetic. It is an archive of surrendered possibilities and practiced silence that became walls. You inherit echoes of deferred dreams but also the capacity to alter the ledger. Refusal to accept the given is not betrayal of kin. It is liberation for those who learn submission is the only safe answer. You will encounter symbols along the way. A rusted key half buried, a bird that refuses ground, an unfinished portrait. At first they seem unrelated. Later, as you learn to read, they nod into a map. Trust their appearance without forcing a solution. Each image points to a room inside you. Fear will arrive dressed as prudence. It will speak in terms of duty, debt, and reputation. Hear caution kindly, then return to the quiet center to weigh what is essential. Courage does not disregard care. It chooses what deserves guardianship and what was assigned without consent. You were not created merely to maintain a pattern. Your existence presses toward a form that matches an inner vibration like a tuned string. When that string sounds, it produces tones unfamiliar to the household. They may appear discordant. They are necessary harmonics that reshape the listening field. Loss will come. Confirmations of identity may peel away with no apology. Some endings arrive with patience, others leave sharp hollows. In those hollows new structures will grow if you allow the process instead of restoring the old scene with borrowed parts. Integrity will be tested not by a single trial but by small repeated choices to honor truth over ease. Each decision trims branches that no longer feed you. Each refusal to perform an expectation sharpens the instrument you carry. These are slow maturations, accumulative and precise. As the threshold widens you will sense the gravity of new responsibility. It is not a public accolade you have been prepared to hold. It is a steady light to be tended so narrow paths can be seen by others still afraid to walk. Stewardship is quiet and often unseen. Its authority is softer than applause and firmer than claim. You are called to a life where outer narrative follows from inner accord. Actions become translations of an inner grammar composing itself within you. You will awaken on ordinary mornings with sudden readiness to say a word, to open a door, to step through a choice previously unimagined. Hold fast to listen. Let small signals accumulate and trust when they coalesce into urgency. Move with the strange confidence of someone who remembers an unspoken promise. Expect paradoxes. Hold tenderness for those who misunderstand and firmness for truths that cannot bend. There will come a moment when the veil tears enough to reveal a horizon that feels like return. It will not be a spectacle for praise. It will be an alignment that leaves you with simple tools of presence and a precise obligation to the life you now carry. Keep your hands open and prepared. The work ahead is inward and outward. It is the weaving of private conviction into public patterns so the world, slowly and without drama, adjusts to the resonance you maintain. Trust the modest currents that guide your steps. They are small engines of change that, when honored, move mountains you thought fixed in place. Amen. You move through a corridor of weathered rooms where memory hangs like tapestries waiting to be read. Each fabric bears a pattern you half remember and half reject, a weave of hope and habit. Light slips through narrow seams and paints certain surfaces with a patience that feels like invitation. Your steps are careful but not timid, as if you walk in time with a rhythm older than certainty. Voices that once appointed you to roles now sound distant and thin, as if heard from behind glass. Their insistence is familiar yet no longer commanding. You learn to listen differently, tilting your attention toward impressions that were always small and easily dismissed. A scent, a syllable, a glance become signals that point without explanation. A mirror appears in an empty chamber. When you stand before it, you do not find a single reflection. Instead, the surface divides into several panes, each holding a possibility that might have been or might yet be. One pane shows steady labor, another a narrow lane where performance secures approval, a third opens to a quiet room where thought is an altar. You do not need to choose immediately. The mirror offers a survey of roads not to intimidate but to demonstrate that your life contains more than habit. Companionship alters shape here. Some who once shared your table grow still and repressed, unable to follow the lines your attention traces. Others change into allies whose presence feels earned by shared silence rather than shared applause. You begin to learn distinctions between those who echo your noise and those who hold a listening that amplifies what matters. A small object draws your hand. It is not valuable by worldly measure, but it hums with a feeling of rightness. When you cradle it, you experience recognition that is not explanation. This knowing bypasses logic and lives in the mirror. It teaches another grammar for decision-making. Obligations present themselves again, but they arrive with different textures. Some demand immediate action and leave residue of noise. Others whisper and leave the room. You practice responding to whispers rather than clamor. In doing so, you conserve energy for tasks that extend beyond fleeting reward toward an axis of meaning. Tension remains. Old loyalties press for maintenance of comfortable narratives. There will be pressure to repair what is only a shell of earlier purpose. You will be asked to perform the same acts that once bought you acceptance. Refuse, gently yet firmly, the rehearsal that keeps you in place. Refuse not as mere rebellion but as careful conservation of intent. At times the air grows so thin that breath feels like friction. In those moments you might doubt the path and consider a return. The return is a seduction disguised as safety. It promises familiarity and simple proof of belonging. Yet you notice how small the world looks when you peer back into it. Your perspective has widened and what once seemed like home now reads as a stage. Symbols keep arriving, a door with a carved spiral, an echo like a bell down a well, a scar on a tree where branches once tied. They have no immediate manual. Their meaning accrues as you allow experience to translate them. A motif emerges, broken circularity yielding opening. This pattern repeats in your days like a secret cadence. The work here is patient and often invisible. It is the reconfiguration of attention. It is the slow swapping of reflexes for choice. It is the deliberate shift from automatic response to intentional presence. These micro-changes compound into new architectures of habit, and with them new territories become approachable. Grief will visit without fanfare. It comes for reasons that do not always make sense. Sometimes it arrives as empty space at the breakfast table, other times as a sudden recognition that affection you banked on was conditional. There is no grand cure. Grief needs listening and respectful tending. Name it, breathe the edges of it, and then let it teach rather than define you. You are invited to cultivate a different relation to time. Instead of seeing days as a series of mechanical completions, you begin to notice intervals where attention clarifies and choice becomes available. These intervals become gateways. Act in them and possibilities widen. Miss them and return to the old momentum. A test takes shape not as spectacle but as a steady asking of loyalty to an inner sense. Will you honor the small compass even when the crowd keeps moving in another direction? Will you preserve clarity when the pressure to conform mounts? Each yes knits a strand into the structure you are building. Experience shows that authority earned through presence is more durable than authority borrowed from role. Practice presence and the world will rearrange itself not as a favor but as recognition. Doors previously closed will ease, not because you demanded but because resonance invites entry. By the time you leave this corridor you have collected new maps. They do not promise ease but they show where to place your attention. Keep them close. They will be necessary when the path ahead narrows and you must move with economies of strength rather than illusions of force. Step forward with regard for small signals and a steady chest. You are not alone in this work, though the company you keep may have thinned. The thinning has purpose. It is the selective clearing that ensures the roads you build are not littered with old expectations that slow progress. Attend to what returns with ease and peace. Those returns mark alignment. Let them gather around you like a modest hearth. Tend that warmth. It will serve you when the weather changes and new thresholds require both readiness and restraint. You have crossed into a season where perception itself reshapes. The landscape around you no longer follows old coordinates, landmarks shift their meaning and new constellations form from scattered truths. As you move, surfaces refract in tension, revealing routes previously invisible. This is not a spectacle. It is a patient rearrangement that tests how well you carry clarity when the familiar dissolves. Now the center of gravity within you tightens into a decisive line. Decisions that once required pages of justification arrive with sudden brevity. You discover that certain choices strip away excess until only purpose remains. That sparseness is not lacking, it is the economy of a life paired to its essential axis. In that economy each act matters more because it no longer competes with noise. You encounter mirrors that no longer return vanity. Instead they hold scenes that teach you to recognize consequences. In one pane a promise left unkept grows tangled in cobwebs. In another a small mercy flourishes in quiet light. These reflections are honest and sometimes unforgiving. They ask you to make reparations where avoidance carved deep grooves, and to celebrate where small courage seeded new foliage. Communion changes tenor. You will find some relationships reconfigure into mutual practices of attention rather than exchanges of obligation. Conversations slow and become lucid. Shared silences begin to anchor rather than isolate. These alterations reduce friction and allow for deeper labor, the kind that reshapes inner terrain and then outward structure. There will be a phase where intangible forces press against thresholds like wind before a storm. You will feel pressure around choices that matter because they will magnetize future shape. Your work is to breathe through the compression and to allow selection to occur from a place of calm rather than desperation. Anxiety tempts you to accelerate. Instead, remain deliberate and let the field clarify itself. An emblem will appear repeatedly, a narrow bridge of old stone spanning a shallow ravine. When you step upon it, the surface hums faintly beneath your feet as if acknowledging passage. Crossings like this are not tests of courage alone, they reveal what you will carry forward and what will fall through the cracks. Watch what you grip and whether it steadies or weighs you down. You will be invited to practice fierce gentleness. There is power in tenderness that is intentional, not sentimental. When you meet your own edges without judgment and offer small remedies, resilience forms in places of pain once hollowed out. These repairs are not erasures, they are careful rewiring that creates more capacious pathways for tenderness to travel. Longing will change shape. What previously registered as an ache for recognition will refine into an appetite for depth. You no longer hunger for applause but for fidelity to an internal standard. That shift makes the work quieter and more exacting. Rewards become subtle alignments rather than applause, and you learn to find sustenance in those quiet confirmations. You must attend to language. Words will arrive that open corridors inside you when spoken aloud. They are precise and often simple. Name the movement you feel and the motion will settle from vagueness into focus. Language here acts like a loom. The terms you choose gather threads into coherent cloth. Be careful with sloppy phrasing because it dissipates the very pattern you are trying to weave. A moment will come when an old fear reappears not as a specter but as a teacher. It will offer one last curriculum, humility, not by shrinking you, but by reminding you of context. Humility tempered by resolve becomes a vessel. It allows authority to exist without arrogance and influence to be tender instead of coercive. You will also experience sudden generosity from worlds you cannot yet map. Doors you did not knock upon will open. Strangers will deliver precise clues. Opportunities will arrive that make no immediate sense economically but that feed the architecture of your mission. Accept with discernment and gratitude. Do not mistake serendipity for invitation, nor invitation for obligation. There is a season of calibration ahead where skills that felt dormant or incidental suddenly matter. Small aptitudes become levers for broader work. An old hobby becomes a method of communication. A private discipline transforms into a public resource. Pay attention to what recurs. These repetitions are signposts, not noise. You will face choices that pulse with moral weight. They will ask you to decide between easier continuity and harder realignment. Choose the alignment that preserves integrity even if it narrows popular comfort. Not all losses are defeats, some are clarifying cuts that render the path sharper and more true. In the middle of this unfolding you will encounter an allegory of fire that burns not to destroy but to forge. These flames touch material attachments and transmute them into instruments. What remains is not mere ash but refined metal ready to be shaped. You become smith and metal both, learning to temper impulses with patience so that creation is durable. Trust the sequence. There is a logic at play that moves through erosion and then through refinement. The experience feels non-linear, yet it composes a coherent chord over time. When you look back later you will recognize how disparate moments linked into an intelligible arc. For now, your task is to inhabit each fragment fully, to answer the summons present in small events. Prepare for a narrow victory that expands capacity rather than notoriety. It will not signal the end of the challenge but it will confirm that your bearings are true. This win is a permission slip from life itself, allowing more ambitious labor to proceed with a grounded center. Finally, understand that you are learning to steward an influence that operates in quiet increments. Your presence will alter situations subtly until a tipping point arrives and collective change becomes plausible. Stay steady. Tend the small fires. Speak the precise words. Move with care. The architecture you build now will host generations of possibility long after immediate outcomes have faded. In the midst of this crafting you learn that one precise act can redirect momentum. Small commitments, held in humility, accumulate a field that invites others to join. Do not expect sudden acclaim. Expect gradual realignment. Tend the daily fidelity, let it compound. Your labor is a slow architecture that, when tended, will host a broader future. Remain present, speak with clarity, and guard tenderness as a tool. Continue forward with calm hands and clear intention. You arrive at the final threshold before revelation and find the corridor narrower than memory promised. The walls are porous with echoes of long-deferred choices. Light enters in thin ribbons that require patience. Your breath slows to meet the small rhythms in the air as if the space itself asks measured attention. This passage was never meant to be rushed. A portrait hangs without a frame, made of gestures paused mid-motion like notes held in a melody. Each motion suggests a manner of living, careful refusal, exacting kindness, blunt resolve that will not be derailed by applause. The portrait does not command. It invites you to see which gesture resonates in your chest. You notice a change in gravity. Not the gravity of objects but a moral pull that draws some choices near and pushes others away. Certain options grow heavy with consequence and sink into shadow. Others float forward with a lightness that asks for trust. You learn to move toward what feels light in the body because that lightness maps to alignment. Rehearsed conversations fall away. You stop reciting lines, learn to placate, and begin to speak with fewer words and clearer aim. The sound of your voice reshapes the room not by volume but by form. People who relied on your predictability fumble. Some retreat into scripts. Others step closer because clarity comforts in ways performance never did. A short storm of doubt feels like weather that will not last. It asks hard questions about cost. Are you willing to keep clearing space even when it looks like a loss? Are you prepared to let certain bonds dissolve because they tether you to a smaller life? Answers arrive as small confirmations, steady breath, a return to work that fits, a silence that feels honest. A mirror now shows consequence instead of likeness. You see results of tiny choices made over seasons. Some areas glow from care. Others read as neglected ground. The reflection supplies a ledger so you can direct repair where needed. Repair is not erasing the past but restoring circulation to places that stopped receiving care. A companion appears who does not mirror but maps. This presence carries no answers but reads the signs you collected. Where you saw endings, they reveal corridors. Where you expected walls, they show folds that can be smoothed and crossed. Their work is not to lead but to extend the skill of seeing. The world asks for stewardship, not spectacle. You are invited to hold a smaller authority that preserves space for others. This authority arrives through micro-practices. The way you answer when someone leans on old pain. The choice to name truth even when silence is easier. The discipline to finish tasks that matter to no public eye. These actions compound into a posture others recognize as reliable. You learn to rest that repairs rather than flees. Rest becomes a practice scheduled with seriousness and guarded gently. This recalibrates tempo so work is not frantic but attuned to capacity. Conflict changes shape. Earlier conflicts were ego spectacles. Now they ask, what is owed to truth and what is owed to the relationship? Sometimes truth holds priority. Sometimes a relationship asks for accommodation. Wisdom is negotiating both without sacrificing your inner axis. Exclusion becomes necessary and precise. Not cruelty, but discernment. Certain invitations now read as compromise in plain clothes. Saying no with clarity preserves attention and prevents slow erosion by foreign obligations. Symbols persist. A bell without a striker chimes faintly. A door opens onto a garden where plants lean toward an unnamed sun. These images form a language you can carry. Study them and let their patterns teach rather than confuse. Near the end there is a private ceremony. You step into a small clearing where the ground holds no footprint but yours. You place items you no longer need into the soil and watch them soften. The act clears the past with gentleness and prepares the soil for what comes next. You exit this threshold with new steadiness. There is no triumphant fanfare. Rather a toned readiness to build what integrity now demands. The work ahead is not a singular event but a daily dedication to keep alignment amid distraction. Carry the lessons of this passage, preserve attention, refine language, practice reparative rest, and allow symbols to teach. 10 small promises with seriousness. In the quiet work you do now, the foundations for a different future are laid. Move into that work with steady hands and careful breath. The true opening awaits, but it requires patient tending rather than haste. Allow a gentle community to form around the labor you keep. Invite those whose presence steadies and refuse those who demand spectacle. Let your practice be the quiet instruction others can learn by watching. Over time, small gatherings of trust will form and the work you sustain will ripple outward, shaping a life that reflects the inward truth you honor. Stand with humility and steady courage day. You step into the chamber that completes the sequence and the room feels like a held breath finally given permission to move. Light arrives not as glare but as a careful visitation that lays out a route across the floor, marking where feet may walk without tripping on old assumptions. The air tastes of salt and iron, a reminder that change requires contact as well as resolve. Hear your interior and the outer world translate instead of arguing. Stone questions stand before you. They are not riddles but invitations to answer through living. Which obligations deserve your attention? Which inherited promises can be set down? Where does mercy belong inside authority, and where must firmness refuse delusion? Responses come through small acts. You close accounts born of habit, decline performances that make you smaller, keep rituals that recharge your center. Each measure practices sovereignty understood as disciplined care of inner space so purpose may arise without shame. A tapestry unfolds on the wall. Threads cross in ways that seem random and then resolve into a pattern showing relationships, duties, and tender places. Your choices are chords that echo across a network. Repair in one corner strengthens tensile integrity elsewhere. Small acts become leverage across generations. A figure meets you who offers no manual. Their few sentences are plain and exact. They do not grant authority but verify what already worked in secret. Recognition from a stranger does not inflate you. It simply confirms that your practice resonates beyond private shelter. Betrayal taught bitter lessons. Now ruptures have cleared currents for new trust. Where once you sought proof, you now accept calibration. Instead of demanding testimonials, you cultivate evidence in silence. Convincing yields to a steady being. A bell tolls without a striker. Each chime marks a threshold crossed rather than a triumph. They sync with your breath and set a cadence for persistent work. The life you build will be measured by constancy, not spotlight moments. Legacy feels both burden and soil. Some residues must be buried gently, others tended. You steward memory and earth so what follows inherits steadier ground. This economy is humble but produces persistent fruit. Courage here is modest. It refuses rehearsed apologies and roles requiring self-abnegation. It closes doors so other doors may open. It chooses clarity over charm. A public decision emerges whose true consequence is private. You make your choice visible not for praise but to normalize a posture for those waiting for permission. By modeling steadiness, you offer a pathway to those who cannot yet name their own alignment. Love acquires a different grammar. It holds people accountable without weaponizing absence. It protects tender limits that preserve dignity rather than punish. Relationships carry the dignity of shared work rather than the strain of unmet expectation. At the chamber center, a still pool reflects a sky not quite known. In that surface you see consequence, not prophecy, the shape you are cultivating daily. The reflection offers exact feedback. Accept repairs and celebrate steady care. The sequence culminates not as arrival but as activation, expanding capacity. You are authorized to carry a light that reveals rather than consumes. You are entrusted with tasks requiring patience and firm tenderness. These are instruments, not accolades. As you turn to leave the chamber, the light bends toward a screen at its center. On that surface, a moving image waits to continue the teaching, offering next practices and precise guidance what words alone cannot complete. The scene will not resolve every question, but it will give a ritual to repeat and an invitation to gather with others holding similar work. If this call feels true, follow the frame. Let the sequence on the screen be an extension of what you have learned, a bridge from reflection to disciplined action. Engage with it as a tool, with attention, restraint, and intention to integrate rather than replicate. Before you step back into daily life, set a small pledge. Open the channel that sustains continuity. Make sure you will receive what comes next. Allow select signals to reach you not as distraction but as ongoing instruction. Keep the notices that matter and release the noise that drains. If you accept this charge, claim a practical tether, affirm that you will not lose track of continuity. Allow the channel to reach you. Subscribe so that the next instruction arrives directly and enable notifications so the sequence can find you when a new practice appears. Treat these acts as vows to your work rather than conveniences. Do this quietly, with discretion, and let the work unfold through attention. Go now with hands ready to tend, feet steady for long distances, and a voice that speaks only what you can keep. This moment is not an ending. It is the invitation to live deliberately so others may follow with less fear and more hope.